Welcome to EPG Pathshala. In this paper on methodology of research in sociology, we are discussing the module titled Components of Social Research, Theory, Logic and Method. In this module, you will learn about the three components of social research, namely theory, logic and method. Each of these components is discussed separately, and the relationship of each component with the other two is analyzed. This module explains to you how the methodology of social research is more than application of methods. First, let us look at the definition of research. There are many definitions of research. Tracing the origin of the word research to 16th century France, the concise Oxford English Dictionary defines research as the systematic investigation into and study of materials and sources in order to establish facts and reach new conclusions. This noun usage of the term emphasizes the nature and objective of the activity called research. In simple terms, research may be defined as an activity that consists of two interrelated activities, namely asking questions and attempting to answer them. The attempt at answering questions does not mean that the researcher will eventually find a satisfactory answer. It is likely that the researcher may end up with more questions about the phenomenon that he or she had set out to answer. This must not be viewed as a negative reflection of the way the research was conducted. Rather, it is a valuable contribution to the discipline, as questions direct the practitioners of the discipline to hitherto unknown aspects of the phenomenon in question. After all, questioning is the driving force of any science. Thus, asking meaningful research questions is the fundamental step which determines how the researcher goes about studying a phenomenon and the eventual usefulness of her or his findings. Intellectual curiosity, that is, the desire to gain knowledge for its own sake, practically, and intrinsic orderliness of a phenomenon may motivate a researcher to ask questions. Personal experience, state of knowledge on the subject of research, social premiums, everyday life, and personal values of the researcher may also play an important role in the selection of the research problem. As the aphorism goes, a problem well put is half solved. However, there is no formal recipe for the formulation of a research problem. Systematic immersion in the subject matter and training in the art and craft of interrogating the existing stock of knowledge about a phenomenon will help the researcher in this. What are the characteristics of good researcher? The three components of social research. Be it in the natural sciences or in the social sciences, the questions we ask about the world do not suddenly appear out of the blue. Rather, our questions only arise within the context of general interpretations of what the world is, or based on our meaning systems. Different models of reality will lead to different propositions about what reality is, and so different ways of establishing what can be accepted as real, different ways of justifying the data relevant to reality, and different strategies for collecting such data. These aspects of research and understanding are built into all meaning systems. They can be broadly discussed as three components of social research, namely theory, logic and methods. In actual research, the three components of social research are interrelated. Each one of them is implicated in the other. The nature of their relationship is reciprocal. Please refer the figure shown here, which depicts the reciprocal relationship between these three components. Theory has a bearing on logic and method. Logic has a bearing on theory and method. And method has a bearing on theory and logic. And each one is in turn influenced by the other two. Thus, they can be discussed in isolation of the other two only for analytical convenience. Such an isolated discussion of any one component may clarify its dimensions as well as nuances. However, they are best discussed in a sequence, and the sequence that is appropriate is theory, logic, and method. This is because theory is implicated in and independently influences both logic and method more distinctly than the other way around. Meaning and types of theory. The term theory is one of the most amorphous, misused, and misleading terms in the vocabulary of social scientists. It has a range of meanings. It is used broadly to encompass all thought and narrowly to refer to a single thought. It has been applied to thinking process per se or only to its results and conclusions. It may vary from complete conjecture to solid confirmation, from an unarticulated impression to a precisely defined prediction. Percy Cohen compares the term theory to a blank check. Its potential value depends on the user and his use of it. According to Robert K. Merton, the term theory refers to logically interconnected sets of propositions from which empirical uniformities can be derived. Given the imponderable complexity of socio-cultural reality, sociologists, as most other social scientists, have developed innumerable theories. Sociology has been described as a multiple paradigm science, or being in a multi-paradigmatic stage. Of course, not all theories in sociology have the same analytical status. They differ in terms of such attributes as generality, precision, testability, elegance, predictive power, and the nature of their postulates. In terms of their generality, scholars like Merton have tried to place sociological theories on a continuum from general theories of social systems at one end to detailed orderly descriptions of particulars that are not generalized at all, middle range theory being intermediate to these. Sociological theories can be and have been classified in many ways. For the discussion on the nature of theory as a component of research and its relation to other two components, namely logic and method, it is appropriate to distinguish between substantive theories and general theoretical orientations. Substantive theories deal with particular aspects or spheres of social phenomena. Thus, we come across theories of crime and delinquency, child development, fertility transition, migration, poverty, stratification, suicide, and so on. Overarching these theories are the general theoretical orientations which define the methodological perspective or approach to social phenomena. These are often described as paradigms of sociological inquiry. It is in the later sense of theoretical orientations briefing sociological inquiry that the relationship between theory on one hand and logic and method on the other are delineated in this module. Theory as embodying assumptions. Underlying all research and all knowledge are assumptions. Assumptions are propositions that are accepted as true without proof. They are the basis on which we start the process of acquisition of knowledge about anything. They are also the basis on which we accept or reject knowledge about a given thing. Scientifically speaking, assumptions are by themselves neither true nor false. Propositions in the form of assumptions cannot be tested for their truth content. They are accepted or rejected based on their capacity to explain observed things or reality. If the assumptions have to do with knowledge in which faith is primary, then such assumptions will be believed to be true, notwithstanding any evidence to the contrary. The theory of creation is founded religions as a body of knowledge which rests on belief is an apt illustration of this. On the other hand, if the assumptions have to do with knowledge in which doubt is primary, then such assumptions will be discarded if they repeatedly fail to explain a given phenomenon, or an alternative set of assumptions explain that phenomenon more convincingly. The theory of evolution in biology as a body of knowledge rests on doubt and is an apt illustration of this. Even in science, often no set of assumptions convincingly explains all instances of a given phenomenon. In such a situation, plurality of assumptions may persist for a long time, even if some of them contradict each other. For example, in physics, there are plurality of assumptions to explain the phenomenon of light, hence plurality of theories of light. In view of the nature and complexity of social reality, in sociology and other social sciences, plurality of assumptions is the norm and well accepted. It is for this reason sociology is often described as a multi-paradigmatic discipline. Paradigm and paradigm shift. In its sociological use, the term paradigm derives from the work of the well-known philosopher of science, Thomas S. Kuhn. Writing on the nature of scientific knowledge in his book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, Kuhn argued that scientists work within paradigms. Paradigms are general ways of seeing the world, which point to the nature of scientific work to be done and the kinds of theory that are acceptable. These paradigms provide what Kuhn calls normal science, the kind of science pursued routinely. Over a time, normal science produces anomalies which cannot be resolved within the paradigm. Then the given paradigm is replaced by a new one, leading to a new period of normal science, which is expressed as paradigm shift. In sociology, as with many other scientific terms, the term paradigm is used vaguely. It denotes schools of sociological work or meta-theories, each of which is relatively self-contained with its own methods and theories. Assumptions and hypotheses. Assumptions are often confused with hypotheses. Assumptions are never tested empirically. They are therefore never accepted or rejected based on empirical evidence. Hypothesis, on the other hand, is a tentative answer to the research question. In other words, it is a proposition or set of propositions put forward for empirical testing. It is accepted or rejected based on empirical test. Often, hypotheses are derived from assumptions. Thus, the strength of an assumption lies in its capacity to generate testable hypotheses and to explain observations made or results arrived at. A mere rejection of one hypothesis does not automatically result in the rejection of the assumption from which it is derived. However, if repeatedly hypotheses derived from an assumption are rejected, or if the assumption does not adequately explain the observations made or results arrived at, then it is bound to be discarded. Ontology and Epistemology. In doing research, we make two sets of assumptions. The first set of assumptions is about the nature of reality that exists, or we believe it exists. It is concerned with how we define the subject matter of our discipline or the particular object of our research. These assumptions are called ontological assumptions. The second set of assumptions is about the nature of knowledge, about what exists or is believed to exist. It is concerned with the type of knowledge that is possible to acquire about the subject matter of our discipline or the particular object of our research. These assumptions are called epistemological assumptions. Briefly stated, ontological assumptions have to do with reality, and the epistemological assumptions have to do with knowledge about that reality. Obviously, these two sets of assumptions are intrinsically related. We look at Objectivism and Constructivism in ontology. In sociology, there are two contrasting ontological positions. They are Objectivism and Constructivism. Objectivism assumes that reality has an existence independently of the human beings living it and the sociologist studying it. That is, reality has an objective existence. Thus, it is possible for us to acquire objective knowledge about it. Sociologist is essentially a subjective creature with her or his own values and biases. Hence, the emphasis on objectivity in research requires two things. First, a belief that is possible to acquire such knowledge, and second, we must separate values from facts. In this context, one is reminded of Emile Durkheim's first and most fundamental rule of sociological method. Consider social facts as things, quote unquote, Durkheim. Durkheim elaborated this rule by highlighting its three corollaries as follows. 1. All perceptions must be eradicated. 2. The subject matter of every sociological study should comprise of a group of phenomena defined in advance by certain common external characteristics, and all phenomena so defined should be included within this group. 3. When the sociologist undertakes the investigation of some order of social facts, he must endeavor to consider them from an aspect that is independent of their individual manifestations. How rigorously can a sociologist adhere to these rules in the study of social reality, and what compromises he or she makes is a different issue. Then coming to Constructivism. Constructivism believes that human beings are meaning-making individuals, and the transaction of meanings among individuals takes place in the context of everyday life. Thus, sociologists following this line of ontological assumption, called constructivists, emphasize that reality is socially constructed. They are influenced by the overarching theoretical framework called sociological phenomenology. The chief proponent of this was the Austrian sociologist Alfred Schutz, well known for his book The Phenomenology of the Social World. It was refined by his disciples Peter L. Berger and Thomas L. Luckman, well known for their book The Social Construction of Reality, and Harold Garfinkel, who articulated it in its extreme anti-objectivist form in his book Studies in Ethnomethodology. Constructivism shifts the attention from the objective social reality existing out there to social reality being constructed in everyday life. Entailed in this approach is privileging the people as the generators of social knowledge. They are participants in the study rather than being mere subjects of the study. Understanding social construction of reality can take place in the context of everyday life of small groups spread over a long period. The type of knowledge generated by constructivists is remarkably different from that generated by objectivists. Epistemology. In sociology, there are two contrasting epistemological positions. They are positivism and interpretivism. Positivism assumes that science can deal only with observable entities known directly to experience. Based on concrete objective evidence, we can arrive at generalizations about social reality. Further, based on such generalizations, we can construct general laws or theories which express relationships about phenomena. Through empirical research, it is assumed that we can show that the phenomena are related or not related in the predicted way. Explanation in positivism consists in showing that the observed relationships are instances of the general laws or regularities. In positivism, answer to research questions is posited in advance. The relationships about phenomena are predicted, and research consists of testing these predictions. These a priori predictions are called hypotheses, and these hypotheses are tested through the collection and analysis of appropriate data. These hypotheses are generally deduced from some general propositions about the phenomena, that is, a substantive theory. In other words, positivism as an epistemology in general implies the primary use of deductive logic. Moreover, positivism is committed to empiricism, the doctrine that assumes that only source of knowledge is observation and obtaining response to externally induced stimulus. To arrive at generalizations based on observation or responses to stimuli, it uses measurement and numerical analysis. In brief, in following objectivist ontology and positivist epistemology, a researcher is inevitably committed to quantitative approach as the main plank of study. Furthermore, the objective of arriving at valid and reliable generalization requires rigorous formulation of the research design. That is, decisions regarding various steps of the study are meticulously taken and adhered to. This makes the design of a positivist study linear and hard. Markedly different from positivism is interpretivism. It is also called as hermeneutics and worst hen in the literature of sociological theory and research methodology. Interpretivism as an epistemological position is implicated in constructivist ontology. It assumes that as a social science, sociology can only deal with actions and interactions. Beyond these are abstractions such as relationships, institutions, society, etc., which can hardly be dealt with as empirical entities, hence they cannot be observed. Furthermore, instead of seeking to arrive at generalizations about social reality, interpretivism seeks to interpretatively understand the meanings that individuals attach to behavior, things, events, etc. In other words, it seeks to understand the process by which reality is socially constructed. In the interpretative tradition, substantively theorizing about any social phenomenon has to be grounded in the context in which it is located. Hence it is called grounded theory. Interpretivism, answer to research question, is not posited in advance. In fact, engagement with the field can change the research questions themselves. In this sense, hypothesis used in positivism has no meaning in interpretivism. From the data collected in the field, the researcher may arrive at hypothesis and grounded theory. The interpretivist epistemology does not depend on a single source or type of data. Anything which includes oral, visual, documentary and unobtrusive measures that can help in understanding the reality in question will be used as data. Thus, the use of multiple methods for collection and analysis of data is the norm. Much of this data is descriptive in nature, but if available, numerical data is also added. Numerical data is also used. The process by which different types of data collected from different sources and using different methods are put together to arrive at an understanding or explanation of a phenomena which is called triangulation. Research in the interpretivist tradition thus can be likened to solving a puzzle. In following constructivist ontology and interpretivist epistemology, a researcher is inevitably committed to qualitative approach as the main plank of study. Furthermore, the objective of arriving at an understanding of and explaining a complex phenomenon by locating it in its context requires the research design to be flexible. That is, decisions regarding various steps of the study cannot be taken in one go or adhered to meticulously. This makes the design of an interpretivist study cyclical and soft. Then let us look at the second component, that is logic. Answers to research questions take the forming of reasoning. Reasoning is the process of using knowledge, existing or newly acquired, to formulate hypotheses, make predictions, draw conclusions, or construct explanations. The branch of philosophy concerned with the use and study of valid reasoning is called logic. There are three methods of reasoning. They are deductive, inductive, and abductive. Hence, there are three types of logic: deduction, induction, and abduction. Let us look at deductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning starts with given premises or propositions to arrive at a guaranteed specific conclusion. If the original premises are true, the conclusion must also be true. That is, it moves from the general rule to the specific application. The language of formal symbolic logic looks more like a mathematical equation. A deductive syllogism is expressed in ordinary language. The process of linking the conclusion from the premises called deductive inference. It could be either valid or invalid. However, whether the conclusion arrived at through deductive reasoning is sound, that is true, or unsound, that is false, depends on the truth of the original premises, as any premise may be true or false. Thus, inferential process can be valid even if the starting premise is false, but the conclusion arrived at is invariably false if the premises are false, even if the inferential process is valid. Assuming the propositions are sound, the rigorous logic of deductive reasoning can give us absolutely certain conclusions. However, deductive reasoning by itself cannot increase human knowledge because the conclusions it yields are tautologies. That means they are contained within the premises and virtually self-evident. That is, tautologies are statements that are true by necessity or by virtue of their own logical form. Inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning begins with observations that are specific and limited in scope. Based on these observations, it arrives at a conclusion that is likely but not certain. In other words, inductive reasoning moves from the specific to the general. Conclusions reached by the inductive method are not logical necessities. No amount of inductive evidence guarantees the conclusion. This is because there is no way to know that all the possible evidence has been gathered and that there exists no further bit of unobserved evidence that might invalidate one's conclusion. This cautions us against the language of inductively reached probable conclusions. The fact that inductive reasoning cannot yield absolutely certain conclusions does not mean that they are useless. In fact, evidence-based inductive reasoning can actually increase human knowledge. It can make predictions about the future events or as yet unobserved phenomena. It is useful in sociological research as a basis of grounded theory and a source for the formulation of hypotheses in areas where there is little generalized knowledge. Abductive reasoning. Deduction and induction are the two main and contrasting types of logic in research. Abductive reasoning typically begins with an incomplete set of observations and proceeds to the likeliest possible explanation for the set. Apparently, abductive reasoning is similar to inductive reasoning. The difference between the two is that inductive reasoning requires the evidence that might shed light on the phenomenon to be fairly complete, whether positive or negative, but abductive reasoning is characterized by lack of completeness either in the evidence or in the explanation or both. In science, often deductive and inductive reasoning are not just enough. A creative leap of imagination and visualization that is apparently scarcely warranted by the mere observation may result in a path-breaking discovery. Albert Einstein's theory of relativity based on thought experiment is a good example of how abductive reasoning can be creative, intuitive, and even revolutionary. Let us look at the third component, that is method. There are different types of data. They are primary and secondary, quantitative and qualitative, and objective and subjective. Primary data are those required to be collected afresh by the researcher. Secondary data are those already available to the researcher, though not in the form in which he or she wants it, as the same would have been collected for purposes not necessarily the same as those of the researcher. Data collected through interviews and questionnaires are an example of primary data, and data collected as part of the decennial census and large-scale sample surveys conducted by various organizations are an example of secondary data. Quantitative data are numerical in form and they can be subjected to quantitative analysis to find out the distribution of traits, relationship between variables, and trends over time. Some of the variables chosen for study may be numerical by nature, for example, age, income, family size, etc. Others may be nominal in nature, to which numbers are assigned to facilitate quantitative analysis, for example, caste, gender, religion, linguistic background, etc. Qualitative data are descriptive in nature. They are expressed through language and its nuances. Narratives of participants in the study and thick descriptions of events are examples of qualitative data. Objective data are those that are external to the individual and to which the researcher has assigned meaning a priori. Subjective data are those relating to the subjective makeup of the individual studied, for example, attitudes and opinions. There are different types of data and there are different methods of collecting and analyzing them. Apparently, the choice of the type of data and the method adopted to collect them is a technical matter. That is, what is most helpful in answering the research questions on hand. On a closer examination, it will be revealed that this is not a technical matter alone. Both the research design and the choice of the type of data and the method for collecting them are significantly influenced by theory and logic. This is clearly illustrated in the table. Triangulation. Tapping off data from multiple sources and using multiple methods for collecting them necessitates integrating and synthesizing them. The process of doing this is called as triangulation. Triangulation is a method used by land surveyors and map makers to locate a spot by taking bearings from 3 known points and plotting their intersection. To conclude, in this module, so far we have discussed about the 3 main components of social research, namely theory, logic and method. It may be said that these 3 are reciprocal in nature. Theory has a bearing on logic and method, logic on theory and method, method on theory and logic, and each one is in turn influenced by the other 2. Social researcher has to understand the relationship between these 3. Hence, it may be said that the methodology of social research is more than mere application of methods.